Hi everybody, we're going to continue with our industry analysis by discussing the value system framework. We are also going to discuss profit pool one more time. I gave you a reading on that, but it'll be very brief because I know you've already familiarized yourself with it. So let's start talking about the industry value system. Okay, make a note. However you make a note, type your note, write it down. Value system is for the industry. We're going to learn an internal analysis framework that is called the value chain, but that's internal, and it's very easy to mix these two up. So remember, value system is for the industry. Think of an ecosystem, it's big, and then the value chain is internal to a firm. Let's begin discussing the value system. I think the book does a very nice job of describing it. We can think of it as a river. You can forward integrate and go downriver. You can backward integrate and go upriver. The idea behind a value system is it's every piece along the path where value is added to a service or a product. Slightly different than profit pool, because if you remember my picture from the previous lecture, we included automobile insurance in the profit pool. And that really has nothing to do with delivering a car from manufacturing to the end customer. Right? So value system is about every step along the way of adding value. That's where the word value system comes from. We'll talk about profit pool in a minute. So a couple of terms, right? We already talked about vertical integration. So you can go downstream and it's forward, upstream and it's backward vertical integration. And then horizontal integration is when you go outside of your industry, where horizontal diversification, not integration, when horizontal diversification, you go outside your industry. And if you develop that with resources internal to your firm, we call that internal diversification. And if it's by working with a firm outside, either acquiring it, joint venture, partnerships, then that's external diversification. Okay, I'm going to tell you about another tricky kind of two words. Right, so we're talking about diversification right now, which is going outside your home industry, right, or your home product offering, your home service offering. We also talk about in the three generic strategies, differentiation. Do not confuse the two. Right, so differentiation is one of the generic strategies. It imbues everything in the organization. Whereas diversification is not a generic strategy, but a strategy for growing your firm. I think the book does a really good job of covering kind of complex frameworks in a very concise manner. The only place where I would change something in the book that I've asked you to read is in the direction that the value system is drawn. So look at this. The book draws it in a horizontal manner. And so then when you do horizontal diversification, you're actually going up or down. Many documents would draw the value system in a top-down manner so that when you go horizontal diversification, you're actually moving to the side. So let me give you a value system example that is not in your book. Okay, so if we were to discuss the crude refining industry, you have exploration for crude oil, you have extraction for crude oil, you have shipping of crude, you have refining of crude, which then produces many, many different types of fuel given the length of the molecule, in addition to other byproducts that go into plastics. Right? So you have the shipping then from the refinery of all the different refined products, but we're sticking to fuel. And then you have wholesale, and then you have retail. And so we have companies that focus just on exploration. And we have companies that focus just on extraction. But we also have companies such as Exxon that do it all. Exploration, extraction, shipping, refining, shipping, wholesale. Well, they probably skip out the wholesale because they don't need to have it. Straight to retail. So that would be, of course, vertical integration. Now let's go back to the example where we have different players who aren't completely vertically integrated. Here in Missoula we have Nunes, which is a fuel wholesaler and a retailer. So they went forward integrated. But let's think about a way that news could horizontally diversify. Perhaps they externally diversify by buying grocery stores. So I'm not talking about the convenience store within the gas station. We're talking about buying perhaps Missoula Fresh Market stores. So that would be a version of horizontal diversification. Let's discuss in further detail an example from your book, the value system in the e-book publishing arena. So let's go back in time to 2010 when Apple announced that they were going to release the iPad. So we have January 27th, 2010. Well, did anybody have an iPad back then? There just wasn't much on it. We had one, and I guess you could call us early adopters. It had an app where you could play this game where you bred frogs and they would come out different colors. You could pay for pretty expensive TV shows by purchasing them, not streaming them. Netflix did not exist in the streaming form at all. And then you could also read books. Right? So in a way, when it first came out, it was a very expensive ebook reader. Well, just the very next day, Amazon announced that they're going to pull all of the titles from their marketplace from Macmillan, the 6th largest publisher in the world. Why? It's because Amazon was pressuring Macmillan as a supplier, and they had the power to do it. And the reason they had the power to do it can be explained by the value system. So let's continue to talk through this. And that value system was very effective because just not that many days later, Amazon announced that the Macmillan titles were reinstated in the Amazon marketplace for ebooks. Okay, so let's go back. This is a picture of the traditional book publishing value system that has been around for a very, very long time. You have the author, the agent, the publisher, the printer, the wholesaler, the retailer. So lots of steps along this value system that add value, and each of these steps has to make money to continue to exist. It comes in Amazon.com. They don't have to have retail space, right? So they don't have to have wholesaler. They ship books directly to the customers at that point. So they cut the wholesaler out of the value system, which then allowed them to capture some of that profitability. They also offered low costs, right? But they did capture some of that profitability. Well, then Amazon comes out with the Kindle. And look what happens to the value system. Not only did we get rid of the wholesaler, but now we don't really need a printer, and we don't even need any infrastructure stocking these books at all. We just need servers. And if you think about it, this is the point where Amazon can really put the screws to Macmillan. It is a direct relationship between the publisher and the seller, the retailer. And so if Macmillan wanted to be represented in the Amazon ebook marketplace, it had to make concessions. So now people can self-publish. Think about it. Many of you probably know somebody who has self-published a book. Some have printed it, which can be done, requires more cost up front, and others publish it electronically. And in that case, now all of a sudden, the agent and the publisher are cut out. And although they're of varying quality, Amazon has these vast resources of suppliers. And think back to your 5 forces analysis. There are so many suppliers of books, of self-published books, and very few distributors. And all of a sudden, your suppliers have very little power. Right? Couple of fun facts that I read in the Wall Street Journal. Right? The first book to ever jump from pure electronic publishing to print publishing was 50 Shades of Grey. The category of genre called books, like the kind that might have embarrassing covers on it. It is called Smexy, and that genre has been growing significantly with the Kindle and ebooks. And of course, we all know The Martian. It was a fantastic book, great movie. That was a self-published book, pretty amazing, right? So there's some really great self-published books out there also. So let's just kind of look at what the marketplace was like before Apple announced why Amazon might be a little concerned, and at their generic strategies. So take a look at this. Prior to Apple announcing the launch of the iPad, so 2006 to 2009, Amazon dominated this ebook marketplace. Of course, there's Barnes & Noble, Nook. There was the Sony version, but Amazon was selling 70% of the market share. 2.5 million books to date. The Kindle price, it's hard to believe that one for just reading a book was $259 back then, but it was. And it was $10 per book, right? And the split is Amazon had 65%. The publishers only had 35%. Now, Apple announces it's coming out with the iPad. iPad price, higher than the Kindle. Of course, it was color. It offered not just reading, but movies, music, apps. It's a differentiator. So Amazon's the low-cost strategy. Apple is the differentiator. And you can see in the pricing of the books, it's higher. And Apple made way more concessions to the publishers. If you think about why they might need to do that, Amazon was putting a lot of pressure on them not to distribute through Apple. They had to make more concessions to their suppliers. So if we look at the value system prior to Apple entering this market, you can see you have Amazon, Sony, and Nook. Well, then you bring in Apple, and you have some new competitive dynamics. And Apple knew that it had to provide more than just books. And so they really worked to try to reduce the cost of buying episodes to watch on the Apple iPad. And they really worked with the suppliers to try to give them a good price. And in fact, so much so that in 2013, they were found guilty in price fixing. So what happens with the Nook? Well, the Nook's not doing very well, but Barnes & Noble says a new tablet's coming. But if we really think about who's going to win this battle, we could think about the generic strategies. And I will say Amazon is a overall low-cost provider. They're very innovative. You would never say that they're not innovative. But they're also pretty cutthroat. I mean, they bled diapers.com. They cut the price of the diapers on the Amazon marketplace to the point where diapers.com finally kind of caved and just sold themselves to Amazon. So Amazon knows its strategy, it sticks to its strategy, and it's very innovative. So if we think about the generic strategies, as long as Apple sticks to being a differentiator and doesn't try to take on Amazon and its Kindle for the low-cost strategy, then they're going to, kind of continue to do well. Although it was pretty interesting how quickly Amazon came out with the Kindle Fire to try to compete with the iPad. And it's still at a lower price point though, right? So they're sticking to their strategies. If we think about the 5 forces, right? Amazon has been much better at trying to reduce the power of its suppliers. It has definitely tried to reduce the threat of entrance by making it harder to get suppliers, right? And by kind of economies of scale or dominating the market, trying to develop brand loyalty. Apple's done really well at maintaining brand loyalty, so its buyers are less likely to switch. But if we think about substitutes, there are quite a few substitutes for books. Going without is obviously a choice. You can check out a paper book, you can buy a paper book, you could, for ebooks, you could get one from the library, you could down one legally from the internet. But the real substitute that seems to be trending is not reading, but rather watching video clips, right? Or social media. And you can see from the value system how important it is to profitability for companies if they are able to kind of use that value system to their advantage. So let's talk about profit pools relatively quickly. I asked you to read the Gadesh and Gilbert article, and it is slightly different than value systems, and so I really do want to talk about them. So value systems is everything in the delivery of the product or service that add value. Profit pool is anything in the industry that goes around delivering that service or product. And so it could be more things you could think of for your recommendation for your company to improve its profitability, right? So you may recommend that they forward or backward integrate or horizontally diversify, but you might also say, oh, I'm going to look at the profit pool and see where there's some pretty good profit margins, and maybe we can use what we have within their firm to leverage ourselves into that space. Right, so here is another idea of a value system. This is the agricultural food system, and this comes from an article that was published by KPMG in 2013. And you can see here that you have input companies, which I know the case you prepared, the potash industry. Agrium would definitely be an input company. Then you have your farmers, traders, food companies, retailers, and consumers. And you can see that it kind of goes up that chain, or that value system. Sorry, don't use the word chain. That value system. But you do have some companies who can go around stages as well. So you can have farmers who sell directly to the consumers, such as with consumer-supported agriculture or farmers markets. And you have input companies who then sell to the food companies because they might have inputs that get into the processed food that the food companies then sell. So we look at this, we get some ideas, but even more important is trying to think about the profitability of these different steps or places in the profit pool. And so if you look at this graphic also from the same report, you can see that, if I'm an input company like Agrium, chances are I probably don't want to forward integrate into becoming a farmer. Right? Look at the EBIT. It's just not nearly as good as that of the food companies. So I'm much more interested in entering the food company space if, when I do my internal analysis, it seems like I have the right resources to be able to do that well. All right, so let's take a moment now that we've talked about profit pool, and please do email chat in the chat function. Let me know if you don't understand it, because we can have further discussions. But I'd like to talk to you about your project. So your first presentation is coming up, and you will need to load a recording of your project. How you choose to do that is up to you. You could do voice capture over the slides. That's absolutely fine. Chances are you're going to have to load it to Box. There is a 500 megabyte limit on files loaded to Moodle. So you can sort that problem out when you get there. But your first piece of your project is focused on the external analysis. So please, please, please do not waste 2 of your 10 minutes on explaining the history of the company or the company's detailed operations. That's going to be your next presentation when you talk about the internal resources of the firm. Okay? External. So I want a brief introduction. That's just, what is your company? What does it do? What industry is it in? So I know what you're talking about. Then I want you to do the general environment. Right? Remember, the pestle is the general environment. Please do not talk about the company in the PESTEL and what the company is doing in each of those. We're talking about the general environment. Pestle is the only one where you don't just go industry specific. Then I want a Porter's 5 forces from you. Please explain your justification and logic with that. Then you're going to follow up with an analysis of your existing competitors. I would like to see how are they different than your company. That could be their financials, that could be their geographic scope, it could be their positioning. If you look at my grading sheet, which I'll show you in just a minute, I'm also asking for another framework in addition to Pestle and the 5 forces. It can be something from another class. It could be something else we've discussed, such as the industry change model, life cycle analysis. It could be the value system. There's lots of options here. And then what I want from you after you discuss the industry segmentation and demand issues, and those will be different based on your industry. It could be by category, geography, type of customer. I want you to come up with some opportunities that you see. Not one, more than one. I'd prefer 3, maybe more, but you're not being held to these. A really good strategic analysis project sees what's going on in the external environment, analyzes the firm, and then tries to match them up, right, for competitive advantage. So come up with lots of opportunities that are based on the research you did on your external analysis. I look forward to your presentations. I love learning about these companies and industries. Thank you.